Hello, Bakery Con students. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. So it is February 12th, a little bit in the afternoon. I was up in Wisconsin this weekend visiting some relatives, so just got back in town. But this will be the last video mini lecture last week. So just make sure to wrap everything up for week 6 and spend most of your time week 7 on getting your common assessment done. So let me talk about that first. With the common assessment, like as it says, you'll write APA. Consider like reference pages, part of that 8 to 10 pages. If you only have 8 pages, that's fine. That's all you need. What I would suggest when writing this paper, almost, do it by transitions, bold heading transitions. That'll make it easier when you're going from one idea to the next and addressing the questions. Like one of them, you could just start off like kind of a map about what you're going to talk about in the introduction. Then you could just go to supply and demand and talk about those factors. So, and I let the research write the paper. Let that guide you. Definitely use the in-text citations, all those things. That's what I'm looking for from your research. So, but with the paper, there were 5 main objectives. First of all, anything specific to demand and supply conditions in the market is affecting price and volume in the industry in the firm. So again, you all pick a company you're interested in doing some research on. So just as a quick example, I think I've talked about this in the lectures, but obviously for the price of eggs right now, they're really expensive because there were huge supply shocks from the avian flu and a lot of the chickens being destroyed, and the U.S. not allowing, eggs aren't something you could necessarily import from Mexico and other neighboring countries. We have very strict laws and rules about what can be brought in the country, mostly to try to prevent disease too. But think about your specific firm and how supply and demand has changed in that particular industry or for that particular company. Especially I think about like Tesla right now. Yes, they're giving a $7,500 tax credit by the government, but some of these cars cost $80,000. But definitely the tax credit helps shift the demand for that type of car. But there's other issues such as infrastructure of electricity and having enough places where you could charge your car. Is it reasonable and manageable for people who want to buy the electric cars? Second is the role of government and industry. The government is always involved in some way. At a minimum, there's always HR that you can write about for your particular company. Everybody has to follow the same employment laws, but certain industries definitely and certain firms have to follow like specific safety rules. Or if you're dealing with hazardous chemicals, there might be rules. Or if you're in a securities firm dealing with trading. So dig a little bit deeper and think through this about what ways in which a firm is going to be regulated by the government and how does that firm comply with those particular regulations. So kind of like example, if you're in healthcare, you have to keep HIPAA and records. I was talking to my cousin this way, and my relative talking about that he has to keep records for health records up to 7 years. So that's an example of a regulation where he looks at Blue Cross Blue Shield. 4, it says, how has your firm industry considered use profit maximize the loss, minimize the production to guide their behavior? So think about what's happening in that industry, what's happening specifically to your firm. Is the firm doing quite well? Is it expanding? Is it needing more labor, capital, resources? It's doing well from a profit perspective. Or if you look at a lot of these tech firms out right now, like Meta, I saw Yahoo this week, Amazon, they're starting to lay a lot of people off. The kind of the post-COVID, there's less of a need for Zoom meetings or people staying at home and buying things. So they're in a little bit of a retrenchment mode, and the way they're doing the retrenchment is they're trying to reduce some of the costs, and then mostly through the labor. And then finally evaluate the degree of competition facing your firm or industry. Who are some of the major players? What has the competition been like? Is there one rising to the top? Is there some falling out? Like I know in retail lately, I think it's Bed Bath Beyond. They're really struggling. I think they settled on some type of bankruptcy reform. But, is this just a matter of time before the company is no longer around and it's rebranded and a lot of their inventory is sold off? And then last, what technology-wise, we're all impacted by technology, but how has technology impacted the firm, either through its production process, either how it sells its product, how it makes decisions? So again, try to dig a little bit deeper and think through a bit different ways that technology is impacting your firm. So, but again, I'm happy to answer any emails that you have or any questions that you have. just shoot it to me. It just might be just like a day later that I get back to you. Just briefly with the chapters you're going to be looking at this week. The first one in Chapter 8 is this concept of international trade and how important this is, because many firms today, even in the United States, are multinational enterprises. And the idea in theory is that we would not be able to enjoy the amount of goods and services that we have in the United States without trade. In fact, most economists are not in favor of any embargoes, tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods, or quotas, which are limits. You're going to go through and look at some of the examples, what happens when these are implemented. And kind of usually where you look at this is from a world price perspective. But with comparative advantage, say between two countries, you may have an absolute advantage. You may be able to produce, say, if we were trading, say, wine and, let's pick another one, like maybe corn, and it was England and France. And let's say that France had an absolute advantage in producing wine and corn compared to the British. Well, you may have an absolute advantage, but you can't have a comparative advantage between the production of two goods. It's probably going to be that maybe France has a comparative advantage in production of wine because they have to sacrifice a lot of wine if they want to produce more corn. And maybe for England, they have a comparative advantage producing corn as opposed to wine, because if they switch to wine production, they got to sacrifice a lot of corn. So what you're going to be looking at a lot of this chapter is these opportunity costs. And then by allowing those countries that have the comparative advantage to produce those goods, we can engage in trade and make everyone better off. So your last, that was actually Chapter 9. I apologize for that. And then in Chapter 8 is your first one. It should be a little bit of a review for you if you've had finance, but I wouldn't throw it in there. Again, kind of tie in this concept of present value analysis, how firms go out and raise capital, the different types of businesses. The market hasn't done so well the past year, the stock market, but hopefully maybe 2023 will be a little bit better. We're really watching the Federal Reserve, see what they're going to be doing with interest rates. So hopefully they're finally going to slow down a little bit, and that we hopefully got inflation in check. But if we don't get inflation in check or keep raising rates, then that's not going to be a good sign for the stock market. But in addition to how we raise equity through the stock market or initial IPOs, many firms also issue bonds. Actually, bonds are probably the most prevalent way to raise money. It's just not as hurt us because the stock market gets most of the focus. But again, as the interest rates have been rising, the price of current bonds have been really pummeled because there's much better rates out there now. So firms have to make decisions. Should they wait? Because hopefully interest rates will go down. Or, do they finance now because maybe interest rates could go up even higher. So anyway, that's all I want for this week. So I want to say I really enjoyed working with all of you the past 7 weeks. And hopefully those Chiefs get a win today. So have a great weekend. And hopefully we'll be celebrating Monday. Take care, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.